community on campus has been working very hard to put together a whole bunch of different kinds of workshops, celebrations, conferences, and more taking place all throughout the month of March. Some events happening just this week alone include the Marjorie Ward Lecture with award-winning author Katrina Vermette. That's happening on Wednesday. A lecture entitled Race Shifting, DNA Ancestry Testing, and Kinship Aspirations, the Eastern Métis Movement with Darryl LaRue. That's happening on Thursday. A presentation on traditional healing for Indigenous patients by Dr. Marlon Cook, who just won an Inspire Award, if anyone didn't know that. And that's taking place at the Bannatyne campus. And there's also so much of our regular programming going on. So we have Powwow Practice Group, that happens every Monday night. Fireside Chats take place here in the Circle Room every Tuesday at 11:30. And the Department of Native Studies Colloquium is every Wednesday. So visit umanitoba.ca/Indigenous to learn more about everything that you can take in throughout the month and throughout the year. So before I introduce our moderator, I would like to acknowledge where we are by sharing the U of M's traditional territory acknowledgement. The University of Manitoba campuses are located on original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities and in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So that statement has been around for a few years now, and it's shared very widely at U of M events. But recently there's been a lot of talk about territory acknowledgements, and people have a lot of questions about them. So that's why we've decided to have this panel discussion today. So I'll introduce our moderator, who will lead us through this talk, this conversation. Rosanna Deerchild, who's sitting right here in all black. I think we actually are mostly all in all black. She is the host of CBC Radio 1's Unreserved. It's a radio show that shares the stories, music, and culture of Indigenous Canada. She's also a writer and a storyteller, and is the co-founder of the Indigenous Writers Collective of Manitoba. Her poetry collections include the award-winning This is a Small Northern Town and Calling Down the Sky. So please welcome Rosanna, who will introduce today's panelists.
Thank you, Ruth. Black is very forgiving, so yes. I'm not trying to be cool. Johnny Cash is my spirit guide. Yes. So let's talk about Territory and Land Acknowledgements. As Ruth said, we hear them a lot at the start of sporting events like Jets and Bomber games, before theater and musical performances, over intercom during school announcements, and some organizations even say them at their AGMs. You just heard the U of M's traditional territories acknowledgement that is shared at major events such as special lectures, conferences, luncheons, and things like this. But recently there have been conversations and debates about land acknowledgements in institutional settings. Are they becoming token? How do we make sure that they are shared in a meaningful and we practice action to support them? Today we have three guests who will speak to this. Elder Harry Bone, here to my left, has spent his life serving others through leadership roles as an educator and scholar and a public servant. He received an honorary Doctor of Law degree from the U of M and is an appointee of the Order of Canada. He was part of the committee that wrote the U of M's traditional territory acknowledgement. Please make welcome Harry Bone. And to my far left is Loretta Ross. She's the Treaty Commissioner for the Treaty Relations Commission of Manitoba. She is also a lawyer. She has provided counsel to numerous First Nations people, governments, and organizations working on child and family matters, residential school claims, and land issues. Please welcome Loretta. And Will Goodon is a Métis citizen from the Turtle Mountains in southwest Manitoba. He is currently the Minister of Housing and Property Management for the Manitoba Métis Federation. He was also the hunter responsible for the duck at the center of the Métis rights case, R versus Goodon. Please make welcome Will. What'd you make with that goose?
You know, they actually, I've asked three premiers and I haven't got my duck back yet. So.
That's not the first question, sorry, I just really wanted to know what he did. So for those who don't know, maybe we'll start with you, Elder to my left. For those who don't know, what are treaty acknowledgements and why are they important?
For the Anishinaabe people, I think it's important to acknowledge that we as First Nations were here first in what is now Manitoba and Canada before any other people came. I think to acknowledge that, then it's very important. And as you probably know, history hasn't been very good to First Nations people. So I think now we're beginning to recognize, the contributions that First Nations people make. So I think it's important to say that, First Nations people here, whether they're Anishinaabe people, Cree, whether they're Dakota, whether they're Métis people, but we were here first before Manitoba was here. So I think it's important to acknowledge that we need to tell the truth about history. We need to bring justice to history, so it's about our history. So that's why it's important.
And so what you're saying is that a land acknowledgement just acknowledges the nations that were here prior to contact, or what is the placement of an acknowledgement?
Yeah, at the time, 150 years ago when Manitoba and Canada was being formed, the Anishinaabe people were here, Dakota people were here, also the Cree people, and also the Métis people were here as well. But I think it's for us and for treaties, it's the Anishinaabe people that signed the treaties and with the province, and with Canada when they became a country and a province.
I'm going to go to Loretta with this question. How do we make sure that when we're doing land acknowledgements and territory acknowledgements that they're meaningful? And what does that even mean, meaningful?
Well, I think we first off research the territory on which we find ourselves, right? And I know that I think it's been a couple of years since we've been doing land acknowledgements, and they've varied even from when they first started to now. People are having conversations and scratching their heads and saying, why are we doing this? And I think that it's important to go through that process to take the time that it requires to find out who were the original occupants in your territory, and it pays the respect to those people. And it's changed over time, like certainly in our area here, right? We had a lot of the Dakota and the Cree, or Nehethao as they now prefer to be called, and the Anishinaabe people came later, and then the Métis came later, so that, to recognize, I think, our history and the history of the original occupants of the land, and how important that is to our history as an evolving land that has a number of different nations that are part of it.
Will, where did the Métis fit in all of this? As we've heard, there is some timeline issues here, whether who's here first or whose territory was it first. How do the Métis fit in an acknowledgement?
So first of all, I want to say thank you to the university for the invitation here, and to say pay our respects to our elder and the elders as well. That's something that we like to do, is to make sure that those who teach us are acknowledged. But I also want to say that I am very honored to be here. I find myself in situations where I'm like the third or fourth choice. But I feel very honored to be here and very happy to be here.
Perhaps you should wear more black.
I should. What I was just thinking when you said it's slimming, I was just looked at my stomach and I thought maybe I should have worn black too. So that's where I'm going to go to Polo Park after this and find some clothes. So just a couple of thoughts on the idea of land acknowledgements, and I don't necessarily have any issues with it. I think that for me, it's one way. We say that it's part of reconciliation. It's not the answer. It's not the only thing, but it is one thing, and it is. But it also is, because it's done at hockey games, at football games, at lots of different events that happen across our province. Because it's done there, I think there is a small little bit of understanding that could reach across to people that would never think about it otherwise, on how we, on who the Aboriginal, on who the Indigenous people are in Manitoba. As far as the understanding of where the Métis Nation fits in, We're coming up on 150 years in next year in 2020, and we're very proud that it was Louis Riel and his provisional government that did the negotiations, that ensured that rights were protected. There's a story, and I'm going to go off on a little tangent here. So there's a story where my president, David Chartrand, is speaking at the gravesite of Louis Riel on November 16th. That's the day that Louis Riel was murdered. And David is talking about how Louis Riel fought for the rights of the Métis. He fought for French language rights. He fought for education rights. He fought for land rights. And David has an accent. You probably know this. David has an accent, and he said, and Louis Riel fought for other rights. There was a couple people in the crowd, they looked, and actually I was standing beside them, and they turned to me and they said, Louis Riel fought for other rights? Anyways, that's a little aside there, but my point being is that we're very proud that the Métis Nation was played a big role in bringing Manitoba into Confederation, but not just bringing Manitoba into Confederation, because if it wasn't for Louis Riel and the Métis leaders who stood beside him, Canada would have just rolled right through here. All of Western Canada, they would have just rolled right through. Who knows if they would have negotiated with the Métis, or if how they would have signed the treaties, because how they did it in the West was different than how they did it before 1870. So, but going back to the land acknowledgements, like one of the things I wanted to talk about was the idea of not just the land acknowledgements, but sometimes when they are doing some acknowledgements, and U of M seems to be, like I've read it and I've heard it here today, and I think it's fine. I think we need to have I think these conversations are good so that we can, revisit the idea. But as a Métis citizen, sometimes when I hear it at other places, there's a lot of talk about the First Nations, the other Indigenous peoples whose lands we are on. And then it's like the Métis Nation is a throwaway. They almost mumble it at the end. Oh, the other Métis Nation, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, the Métis Nation. So that part bothers me a little bit, because we were here. We did negotiate the entry into Confederation. We were on the land. We hunted buffalo. We had allies. We had enemies. We were out there, so we were here as well, and we are in Section 35 as well. So just a couple of quick thoughts.
So in that sense, do you think that perhaps there should be, I don't want to say separate land acknowledgement for the Métis, saying this is the homeland of the Métis, that takes into account that history? Or how do you think it should be framed in a better way?
That, I don't think it should be separate. I'm not sure. Again, these are all my own thoughts, and hopefully my president isn't watching me and going to give me
right now.
after. Yeah. So, but I don't think it needs to be separate. I think there's ways to do it, and have these conversations is the way to craft these things, to have these talks, and to talk to elders, to talk to leadership. To talk to just regular Indigenous folks who are, at the hockey games. How do people feel about it? We don't want to make it into a huge rigmarole that's going to take another 5 years and a royal commission to do. But at the same time, these conversations are really good.
Loretta, as a treaty commissioner, where do you stand on where the Métis and how much acknowledgement should they get? How do we fit that all into something as simple as a land acknowledgement?
Well, I'm going to avoid the specific issue about the Métis right off the hop. But I think the whole idea of the land acknowledgements is great, because it's a conversation, and as we heard, it took 30 seconds essentially at the most to acknowledge the original peoples, and I think it should be a big deal. I think we should be standing at the Jets games and the Bomber games for that 30 seconds to have that acknowledgement and pay tribute to the original inhabitants of this territory. That's my political speech, I guess. In that way, why not? Why not? We all stand for O Canada at these events. Why not stand for an additional 30 seconds to acknowledge, however we want to do it? And that's a conversation that's going to evolve, and I don't think that we'll need an inquiry as well to do that. But I think we have to take the time and put in the effort to do that. And, we hear different ones, and which, for example, include the Dene, right? And this is not the ancestral lands of the Dene people. And so it's almost, I don't want to say it's insulting, but it disregards those original peoples that were here.
How did that even happen? Are you, I remember back, 20 years when we started doing land acknowledgements. And first it was Treaty 1 territory, homeland of Métis.
Yeah.
And then
I think it's evolution, right? I mean, people want to be included.
Yeah.
People don't want to exclude. And I think there's a way that you can do that without getting one nice phrase that captures everything. I mean, we can't do that, right? I think we have to take the time to mean what we're saying. And each of us, we can do it in different ways. And all of my different presentations that I go to, I'll mix it up every time, just to show people that it's different. And you can do it differently, and we should be doing it differently. And we shouldn't be scripting. It shouldn't be a script that we do. And it's taking the time, though, to understand that history. And it really is a shared history. So taking that time to understand what that history is, and it'll come in different forms. And I think that's what we have to do, is that we can't put ourselves in a nice little package or script that this is sufficient, because that's when it does become meaningless. That's when it becomes like just a token. It's just something that we do. And so when it's not scripted, then it's more meaningful. And the recipients of those, the Anishinaabe or the Dakota people that hear that go, yeah, okay, that's coming from that when we're talking reconciliation, right? That's coming from that good place, rather than this is the in thing to do now is land acknowledgements.
I like that idea of mixing it up. Then it really forces people to hear what you're saying. Exactly. And listen to what you're saying. Harry, I'm going to bring you in here. What should we be thinking about when we're hearing or doing a land acknowledgement?
I think the first words that you hear is welcome to Treaty 1 territory. Just acknowledges the land that was signed here 150 years ago. But also to remember that our rights don't come from Treaty 1 territory. We had rights before them. The Creator gave us rights. In fact, the word Manitoba is an Anishinaabe word. It simply means that what does it really mean? The Anishinaabe people say Manitoba. So why is that word important? They already acknowledged when the province of Manitoba was created to adopt the word Manitoba. It's based on our traditions, based on our people as well. Even the city Winnipeg is an Anishinaabe word. Winnipeg, that kind of stuff. I think even the Assiniboine River is a Dakota word. So I think it's important that we're already acknowledged that the land belonged to First Nations people. But I guess just to say that the source of who we are is important. I don't think we should get into political statements like who was here first, who was here second, that kind of stuff. We're all human beings in the eyes of the Creator, so I think it's important. So for us as Métis people, those are our brothers and sisters. I have a first cousin that's a brother, that's some Métis people. That's what the government created, that those number of things. But for us, I think to acknowledge that we're on Treaty 1 territory is merely to acknowledge that this land that we stand on, this land that we share, is a shared history amongst our people. And then we're here first. Our treaties are based on the eastern part. Our treaties are based on on the Royal Proclamation that was established, Treaty of Niagara, that kind of stuff. I know when they went westward, the government of the day thought that the best way to settle the western part of Canada is through a treaty process, negotiated. They didn't want to go into war. And there's two things that they wanted to do here, of course, in Manitoba was immigration and the railways. So that's important, So it's not that the wars that we had, I know Métis, the northern people nations, they provide a great position for us, to fight, for the rights for our people as well. But I think, to acknowledge, the Mother Earth, acknowledge the land is very important, because, in our ceremonies, the Creator comes first, that the land is important. The air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the animals that we share the land with is important. So I think land is important for all of us. You know, so human beings come third. So I think, you know, for us to say that welcome to these great lands amongst our people, I think it's important. You know, but as the Prime Minister said, it should be more than that. Shouldn't be just a token word. I like the idea that, you know, that we should stand up, you know, the time, see how proud we are, you know, who we are as First Nations people. So good.
And who should be delivering territory and land acknowledgements? Should it be kindergarten all the way to university, sporting events right to our political houses? Who should be doing these?
I think it should be everybody. I think, you know, education is important. Education about, you know, how this great country was formed. That includes First Nations contribution. You know, then that avoids no racism. That avoids no discrimination and tolerance that's involved with it. So young people should know what, you know, the great lands were. First Nations were here first as well to share this great land. So I think, you know, that's important. Education is important. So I think, you know, education like universities, colleges, you know, high schools, you know, are important for our young people to understand that. Because it avoids the true history of what is now Canada land too is important for everybody to know. Even newcomers as they come, they should know that, you know, this land was founded on First Nations people. You know, I think that's important to understand it.
What are your thoughts on who should be carrying out land acknowledgement? Should it be everybody or?
Yeah, I agree with Harry on that, absolutely. I think there might be a little danger that it could become just something that we tune out when we hear it, and, you know, we're at the hockey game and we just start talking to your neighbor and not paying attention to it. So I think there needs to be, you know, again, these continued conversations on how to make it meaningful. I like the way Loretta talked about, like, don't just have you want to make sure that it's done properly, so you want to, but don't just have something written and it's just a monotone voice that comes across the loudspeaker, and then that's when people will have a tendency to tune out, and that's when it will become token. You know, in all of our cultures, elders are very, very important, and I know that we, at least in the Métis Nation, at least in our world, we use our elders a lot to open meetings, to help assist us going through the meetings, and there is a danger again of like burning them out too, because there's only so many available, and some of them are getting older and they're not as mobile as they used to be. But I think, yes, I have no problem with it being done wherever is appropriate, wherever people feel the need to do it, because again, I think it's one of those things where if it can open up one person's eyes, if it can teach one person, you know, I was listening on the way in from Brandon today. I listened to audiobooks, and there's this one book that I'm listening to right now, and there's a part of the book talks about this racist trial going on in Norway, and, you know, if we can reach one person to turn their minds around and to have an understanding that we're all here living in Manitoba together, and yes, Indigenous people were here first, you know, but it's more than just being here first. You know, it's also the issues that happen through the residential schools. What happened in the '60s scoop? Why did we have the Truth and Reconciliation Commission? You know, the broken promises, the broken treaties. You know, we have to go to court to assert our rights, whether it's for hunting or land or whatever. You know, those, again, it's not going to fix. This is not going to fix those things. But again, it's that one thing that'll help people be aware, and I think awareness of who we all are is when things start to slowly heal.
I think that, and agree. I mean, I also agree with Elder Bone that it's for everyone. there is no inappropriate time not to acknowledge, right? And I think that it only becomes meaningless if we don't follow up and do the other parts of reconciliation. And so I think that if we think, check, I've done a land acknowledgement, pat myself on the back, I'm good, that's the mistake, and that's where it becomes meaningless. I think it's a great start. It's a great way to acknowledge people. Often we shake people's hands, to acknowledge and to greet, and I don't see why this shouldn't be a common way of greeting and acknowledging. And but follow it up, right? Follow it up with the other pieces of reconciliation, and as Will said, opening our minds as well to that history. It's not all going to be resolved in that 30 seconds, but I tell you, it's a positive and it's a fantastic way to start.
I just want to bring in the audience a little bit here. First of all, if anybody has any questions, to stick up your hand. But you had said something really interesting. If it opens one person's eyes. I'm curious to know if anybody out here has changed their perspective or their viewpoint, or have done that extra step in terms of learning about what territory they live on. First of all, who knows which territory this is? Show of hands. He's like, it's mine. And does anybody want to share their thoughts or perspective in terms of how a land acknowledgement has affected you personally, or if you've done one yourself? Oh, I see a hand up here. This lady.
I'm Charlotte Enns from the Faculty of Education, just across the way. And I was often concerned, because we do use the acknowledgement here at the U of M a lot, that it was, is it meaningful, is it tokenism? And then I went to a meeting with other academics in BC, and we were visiting an Indigenous school, which was absolutely beautiful. It's right beside a river where the kids go out and watch the sun and water and things. Anyway, it was lovely, and people were introducing themselves, all the teachers, as, I'm Cree from this area of the country and that sort of thing. And it was really, it felt good as a white person to be able to say where I was from, not Winnipeg, Manitoba, University of Manitoba, but also that I was from Treaty 1 territory, the homeland of the Métis, that sort of thing. And so I think there it hit me that maybe this is something, because all of us white people from different parts of the country were able to say where we were from in a meaningful way in that context, and in terms of the treaties and the First Nations that were in our.
Thank you for sharing that. That was wonderful. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
Can I just say, while someone's, before I lose my thought, I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I know when I'm at different places and I hear it, and just as an Anishinaabe person, when I hear that, you know what, I sit a little bit taller in my seat, because I feel like we're acknowledged, right? The impact that it has for First Nation people, to hear that after all, or Indigenous people, after all of the history and things that we've experienced, to actually hear something like that is can be very powerful. And I think it's also a reminder that we're all in this together, right? I mean, we all share this land, and if we talk about treaties, that's what the treaties were all about, was to share this land and coexist. And that's a reminder for everybody as well. Like you say, I think that's a fantastic story. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, this might be a little bit of a tangent, but when you said people introduce themselves and where they're from, I find, at least when I speak to Indigenous people, when I ask them where they're from, they don't say, oh, I'm, because they live in Winnipeg, I'm from Winnipeg. They say, like I say, I live in Brandon. I don't say I'm from Brandon. I say I'm from the Turtle Mountains, and that's where my Métis community is. So I think that has a little bit of resonance in what we're talking about here as well today. And I know First Nations people do the same thing. When I ask them where they're from, they don't say I'm from Edmonton. They say I'm from this community or that community, wherever their parents live, where their grandparents live. That's where they're from.
Had a comment from a gentleman.
There's two guys back there.
Two guys? One guy? One of you guys?
Thanks very much for having me and joining the session. My name is Dan Clark. I'm from the Adopted Kinesiology and Recreation Convention here at UM. And I'm going to get out of from the Goodon Showing Confederacy. For those of you who don't know, that's Mohawk from the Six Nations. And I'm from the Six Nations of the Grand River in Southern Ontario. I'm concerned about the land acknowledgements. I understand that as a political act, it's raising awareness about our history and history of colonialism and history of oppression. I'm concerned though that I'm wondering if it's a good way to bring people into that discussion, however, because it also serves as a tool to sort of alienate people as well. And I understand though that a little bit of discomfort is not such a bad thing after 500 years of colonialism. However, I'm wondering if it is a good way, because in our culture we talk about approaching things with good minds, right? And bringing people into that space and circle. But if you do something that inherently makes someone uncomfortable and making them immediately, I think there's two responses that happen, right? There's people who they acknowledge the land acknowledgement, and then they latch on to it, so to speak, and say, yes, it's a good thing. And then you're going to have those people who immediately say, no, I don't want you to do it. It's not good. It's another example of Indigenous peoples trying to be discriminatory in a sense. So I just want to get some thoughts and then put that idea up there. Because I struggle with it because I have non-Indigenous, or I have non-Native people, friends, colleagues who have expressed that type of discomfort. I know for me going through my own process of decolonization that I felt that discomfort. And I just wanted to put that out.
That's an excellent question. Are land acknowledgement causing more division than they are building bridges? Harry, maybe you could start with answering that.
Thank you for your good question. I think that's an important discussion, but let me just say this. I think it's important for us as Anishinaabe people to hear those words because it opens up a discussion, it opens up your thought. Why are we saying it? It's not only the words that are said, but why are we doing it? It opens up your thought, the way you think, then why is that important? So that opens up a dialogue, a discussion, that then you start to say, well, I wonder why they're saying that. I remember the term "we're all treaty people" was a very negative term, both for us and also the Indigenous people. But that word is not really the final word. That word is just the beginning of a discussion, of a thought. I think that's important. And we should be proud to talk about the history of Canada, the history of Manitoba. That's what it is. To go back, to be ashamed, not to mention that, it's going back, to the original thought about, what the government thought about us, civilizing us, assimilation, denying us our rights, denying us our language through residential schools. Today we're very proud who we are as First Nations people, and we should say so. And I think to acknowledge also for Indigenous people to say that as well, to welcomes our eyes and our ears and our hearts that look, we're all in this together, this shared history, this shared country. So I think that brings prejudice, tolerance, and understanding about other people, especially First Nations people, because history hasn't been very good to us, as you probably know that. It's not only about 20 or 30 years ago that people start to have that discussion about First Nations issues. Before then, we are not important. But now I think the university has accepted that there should be a dialogue, there should be a discussion. In fact, it's very university signed an agreement to the word indigenize First Nations history, meaning that our history is as important as anybody else, and we should be proud of that. We're not looking for a fight when we say that. We're looking for welcome to Treaty 1 territory. They're not saying that that's terroir and that kind of stuff. That's far from it. The land is about relationship. The land is about who we are as all people in the eyes of the Creator. So I think it's important for all of us to remember that. And we should never be proud to say that for us Indigenous people, because for so long, reconciliation. The word is now is a buzzword, right? Reconciliation. then that's the word not everybody's using it. Well, just give me a couple of thoughts on that one. For us as Indigenous people, Anishinaabe people, we have to reconcile with our Creator. We have to reconcile with our traditions. We have to reconcile with our languages. We have to reconcile with our history to understand who we really are. But on the other side as well, other groups of people have to reconcile their own, where they come from, their history, including Canada. They have to reconcile how this great nation was founded on the law that they shaped and the constitution that they have. If you look backwards, it's not a very good, the environment, to know how Canada was founded on. The doctrine of discovery, the land of empty land, papal bulls, all that kind of crap that's happening years before. So I think we need to have that discussion. So that's what this is all about, and I think discussions can only happen at institutions like this, for students like yourselves, in the courses that you take and the subjects that you have. But, the discussions I think is important because that's what happens. If you're going to just sit back in the back room there, then let things go by. But I think discussions. It's a dialogue. It's an opportunity for us to talk. That talk should be positive. So,
I think I really can't add any more to that, but to be honest, that's the first time I've heard that, and it gives me something to think about. And I guess my next question would be, what makes it uncomfortable? And that may be the follow-up question is to say, well, why are you uncomfortable that we do this, whether you're Indigenous or non-Indigenous, and have that dialogue, right? I mean, it's up to each of us to do land acknowledgements or not, but I think, as Elder Bone says, it's the start of a dialogue, and we should feel safe enough to have those conversations, right? If they come from a good place, like Elder Bone has said, then we should be okay to ask those questions and then to take it a little bit further each time.
Well, I'm a politician and I'm rarely short of words, but I agree with both of my panelists here, absolutely. And I think the idea of opening a conversation, which I've said a couple times now, is if that happens again with one person or 2 people or 10 people, that gives the opportunity to explore further healing.
Oh, I think we had that gentleman first in the back.
I don't know if there are any Inuit people in the room, and I don't want to speak for anybody, but it's been critiqued before that the University of Manitoba has a long history of both research and service relationships with the Inuit people, the Gilbert region and Nunavut. And there has, on our little card, there is an Inukshuk on there, and there's Inukshuks everywhere, and the Inuit people have asked us, where are we in this relationship? And I think that we do have sacred relationships and accountability to Inuit people that I think we need to acknowledge in some way. And if this is about acknowledging relationship as much as it is about acknowledging land, I think that we need to find a way to acknowledge our relationship with Inuit people. Also, just given the fact that many people have been taken from their home territory and brought here and have needed to be here for medical reasons against their will. And I think we need to acknowledge that relationship in some way. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, when Loretta talked about the recognizing the Dene, I think the Inuit is a similar thing as well. When we're talking about land, for me, we're talking about land acknowledgements here. So when we say we're on the land of the Anishinaabe, the Dakota, the Cree, the Métis, and others who are here, that's what to me, that's what we're talking about today. Yes, there are Inuit students here, and there are Inuit people who are here in the Red River in Winnipeg. And there may be ways to have a relationship acknowledgement, and that might be one way to move that conversation forward. But I honestly, this is me personally again, hopefully again, nobody's gonna see me on Facebook and give it to me, although they probably will. For me personally, a land acknowledgement acknowledges the land. So the people who are here and have used the land and still use the land, that is what we're acknowledging here. Otherwise, we would be talking about the Mi'kmaq people as well, because there's probably some Mi'kmaq people living in Winnipeg as well. But this is not their traditional land, just as it's not the Inuit traditional land. Now, I'm not sure what my other panelists feel, but that's sort of how I feel as far as the land acknowledgements go.
I think that I agree. If we're doing a land acknowledgement and the original occupants of this land, we acknowledge those. If we have those feelings, there's no hard and fast rules, I don't think, with respect to how we honor people and honor nations. And I think, one of the suggestions that I said is if you want to say in Manitoba, for example, we also have other nations which include the Dene, which include the Anishinaabe, and you can include Inuit in there, that we also have relations with the Inuit people. And so I think it's a progression. Like I said, there's not one snapshot acknowledgement that's perfect. And we have to make it our own. We have to own it, right? Because it doesn't become meaningful if we don't own it. And feel free to add. I've gone to a number of places, and churches have made it their own and what it means for them and their congregation, for example, which is, wonderful. So I don't think there's any hard and fast rules, but if it is land acknowledgement, I think we start off there for sure, right? And then you can go outwards.
Though I think you might have started a new thing, relationship acknowledgements.
Yeah.
Get on that, hashtag it. Harry, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I share, and I think what is already said. But I think we don't want to get too technical. We don't want to get too defining terms. We just want to say welcome to this land. That's shared for all of us. Because we don't own the air, we don't own the water, we don't own that kind of stuff. I think it belongs to everybody, whatever nation that you have. I think to acknowledge people is important. I'm glad that the Métis people acknowledge the Hull rights.
Or otters. It's really could go either way.
But the Hull rights also have a duty. We're invited to go and speak to their colonies about the history of Canada, history of Manitoba. But I think but we do have a courtesy thing that we have in our traditions. Wherever we go, somebody welcomes us. Whether it's Inuit, if we go where they're welcome to our part of the country, same thing. We welcome people whoever they are. So I don't think that it's defined by these people, but it's as long as you're human in the eyes of the Creator, I think you're all welcome.
And this gentleman here had a question.
Yeah. So I heard the remarks from the Portugal person, and as a descendant of Peguis, I relate to that. We're doing land acknowledgements, but we're also still shoving pipelines through it. We're allowing Enbridge and these other corporations to continuously destroy this land and the territories. We're allowing them to destroy the waterways that will then destroy Red River, Assiniboine. All of these water sources will die. They will die. It's not they may, but they will. Especially when the governing bodies don't properly regulate these things. So to me, I get uncomfortable when I hear land acknowledgements because we want to talk about the shared responsibility for which these treaties were signed. But then we also simultaneously ignore those who have that hereditary status to uphold that responsibility and to be those stewards. So to me, when I hear these land acknowledgements, it makes me feel uncomfortable because the people who say them usually don't live in poverty. Meanwhile, those who are the original peoples live in poverty. We live with poor health outcomes. We live in a territory that had cadmium zinc sulfide poison in it, and now they want to poison the water too. So if we're talking about land acknowledgements and the responsibility to the land, we should be considering that. But we're also trying to consider the relationships we have with the land, with the water, and the relationships we have with our own peoples. So that's, yeah.
Well, I don't know if we're allowing it so much as it it kind of just happens. But you make an interesting point. Like, how far does a land acknowledgement? What is the responsibility of that? We're talking about learning what territory we stand on, what peoples that stood here historically. But what does it go further? You talked about reconciliation and what that means. So what does it mean that to do a land acknowledgement? Is there responsibility beyond just saying it?
I think it's important not to be silent. We still have to say these things because that in our traditions, we believe in there's only one creator for all of us, no matter what religion you are in. We also, the second part is the land is so important for all of us. But we as humans, we're given a responsibility to speak for the land. That's why we have languages. That's why we have belief systems. That's why we have history, who we are. That's the way we do things. So we have certain gifts. Our gifts is to speak for the land. If the land doesn't speak for itself, then avoid the pipelines. If you're uncomfortable, then speak for the land. Every time you speak for the land, that's then gives us a voice for the land. If you're silent, they're going to walk all over us. I think it's high time that the government has to know that then we do speak for the land, the water that you talked about, the air that we breathe. So I think it's important, that voice is important. So that's our responsibility as human beings, to make sure that that's conveyed to whoever it is. Somebody good.
Does anybody else want to speak to that?
I was just basically going to sort of reiterate what I said before, is that it's not going to fix everything, the land acknowledgements. And there is a ton of work to do, like on all kinds of issues. Talking about the land, talking about rights to education, about rights for me. I'm the Minister of Housing. Like, how do we get our families into good, safe, warm, dry housing? So these things aren't going to be fixed by land acknowledgements. But again, that's maybe a one small step that we might be able to have things move forward, so that we can then talk about the land, talk about housing, talk about education.
Yeah, I don't think that I have much more to add than what was already mentioned, but you've certainly identified the challenge, right? Therein lies the challenge in land acknowledgements. What's next? Yeah. Where do we go, and how do we put the teeth or the meaning behind it? And we have to have an understanding of what that meaning is. And you may be lucky in the sense that you understand what that means, the land and the importance and the significance of the land. Others don't, right? So that comes back to the challenge of for the rest of us to bring that awareness, and not only just to bring awareness, but that action into what that means. I mean, you look at the treaties, right? People don't have an understanding of what the treaties are. That's exactly what the treaties are, what you've talked about. But people don't know that, right? And so that you have that responsibility then. We have that responsibility to take it those other steps further. And we start with the land acknowledgement. I still think it's a great place to start, but I think to have effect to those, then we have to do those other things that go with it. And as Elder Bone said, we can't be quiet, right? We have to raise those issues, because already you sparked the question in this room and with us that we now will take in others, and so I think it's the beginning of change. At least that's the hope.
So what then is the next step? I mean, how long do we, in knowing that we have young people that are impatient, knowing that we have young people that are like, we need to start a resistance, a revolution, a change has to happen here. Because our water is dying, our land is dying, our people are dying. So how long do we stay in this place of education, waiting for them, our cousins, to catch up with us before we take that next step?
Oh, you're looking at me.
I'm looking at you.
You're looking at me. You're looking at me too. Education is forever. Right? Education is a lifelong process, and we have different stages and different degrees of education, awareness, and then action. And for sure, for today, the young people, and it's not just the young people that are impatient and want to see things happen. I think, and I can't say what we need to do right now, but I wish that things were different and things change. And the institutions that are out there have to be the leaders to be able to do that, because the young people and the elders are talking about the change that needs to happen. You see the traditional knowledge keepers on the land that are saying it's so scary for them. And so it's awareness, general public awareness to make, society and whatever those society is aware that the land is in danger, right? The land is in danger, and that we cannot continue to do the things that we've been doing. I'm going to pass it on to Will. I'm just saying that we have to keep talking about it. Let's not stop. And the education and the awareness, it's ongoing. There's always a responsibility. My grandfather, he was the chief of our community for 40 years, and he said, that's your job, Loretta. You're always going to have to educate. You're always going to have to be talking about our history and our people and the importance of these things. And that's yours too, right? And it's not a responsibility that I wanted. I said, why? Why should I have to do it? Right? It should be government, it should be the universities, it should be all of these that have that responsibility. And they should. But until they get to that point, it is up to us as individuals to carry that. So it is something that you have to accept and carry and go forward just as I have. And we'll do it, obviously, and we can do it in different ways, but I don't think we have to lay it down and say, I'm tired and I don't want to do it anymore. To keep going. Will?
Yes. So, again, with the danger of going off on a tangent, I think political action is, and there are different ways of doing political action. You can get involved at the community level, for the MMF, you can get involved at the local level, at the regional level, at the provincial level. There's obviously regular politics, if I can say that, provincial politics, civic politics, but there's also political action in ways that we have seen in places where pipelines are going through, where communities are getting together and building camps so that the pipelines can't move through, or if you think and there are people who are for the pipelines because they see jobs. So there's political action on both sides, and if you want to have your viewpoint put forward, I always say that's the best. Get involved. Talk to decision makers. Talk to the chiefs and council. Talk to the Minister of Housing for the Manitoba Métis Federation. Tell them your point of view and convince them. I think politics has a bad rap, especially right now. There's a lot of stuff going on in Ottawa. Yeah. So I wasn't gonna. Did I bring that up? I'm sorry. I apologize. So politics does have a bad rap, and there are bad things that happen in politics. But political action, talking to decision makers, becoming a decision maker. All are ways that we can affect change that we want to see, that we want to move forward. And I think those are just a few little things that you can do to move that forward.
I just want to, we're getting a little away from the land acknowledgements, but I kind of want to interject here with, because Loretta mentioned, this is our job. We have to pick that up. We have to do that education. Education never stops. You're saying get involved. We must get involved to bring change. We. But my question is, why is it always we? Like, whose job is reconciliation? It took 500 years for us to be beat down into this situation. So, and then we have reconciliation, as you said, as a buzzword now. But what does that mean? Like, whose job really is it to bring that change? We can't just be always pushing. Somebody has to open a door at some point, yes? I mean, where are we at with that? What are our thoughts on whose job is reconciliation? Want to vote?
Whose job is it? Commentators like you?
I just hold a microphone.
No, I think we, all of us, meaning that everybody as a human person, has a responsibility to talk about the land, its environment, and all that kind of stuff. It's all of us our responsibility. But I think the voice is the key thing. Let me just go back a little bit, for that term, when are we going to get tired of we're welcome to a treaty? When are we going to get tired of it? Well, we're never tired of, singing in Canada. It's a symbol that establishes who we are as a country. And so does land. the land that we stand on is a symbol that, you know, we came from someplace, and we came from this land. As I said before, our responsibility as human beings to speak for that land. So all of us, but I think Will has mentioned, like, you know, it's also then a political discussion. We have to make it public to make sure that the government hears what we're saying. I think that's important because, you know, the more voices we have, the more collective voices we have, because as you probably know, the government is guided by public opinion. So if you change your minds to protect the land, all of us, in this room and whoever doesn't want to believe in the land, the government will change. So I think, that really matters, because, but discussions have to happen. These kind of discussions have to happen. Otherwise, we can't be sitting, in the background, be silent. So I think discussions are important. The universities were meant to be that for discussions, that free thought, that free will, what we want to do. So I think these kind of discussions are important, but it just sets the tune for all of us. But whether we're individual people, whether it's a university, whether it's the government, whether it's in whatever political party there is, they have a responsibility too, because this land belongs to all of us. It belongs for all of us to share this great land. Sometimes when people say, well, then we're going to destroy the land, we're going to destroy Mother Earth. Well, then we're not going to destroy Mother Earth. We're going to destroy ourselves. Maybe then the land will be all gone. Then with all the tornadoes, then all the things happening in the world, the floods. Maybe we'll be all gone. We'll be than dinosaurs sometimes in the future. People will talk about us, but Mother Earth will will heal itself. It's us. We're destroying ourselves, and that's what we're doing. So with that, I think the voices are important. These kind of discussions are important. I think we need to have that, those kind of dialogues more often than this one here, pretty much.
Yeah, he's looking at me. I think I agree. I mean, what more can you add? I think it's our responsibility. If you're talking about as Anishinaabe people or Indigenous people, that's what we're taught. You always do it, and not everybody's going to listen, and that's where you have people in different roles that can push those doors open, push those windows open, push those ceilings, all of those things. But it's a responsibility that we have that we have to carry with us, and we have to keep doing it. You have to keep doing it until we get to that point. But it's not, and it feels unfortunate because as Indigenous people, we've had a lot of things happen to us, right? But that speaks to our resiliency and strength as Indigenous people, and that's why, because we maintain those responsibilities that we have to keep going. We have to be the stewards of the land. We have to be the caretakers, and it's because of those responsibilities that we keep going. And eventually, we hope that we will get to the place where, we're supposed to be, but we may not, as Elder Bone says, right? But that is our responsibility, and we accept that, and we keep going regardless of what we face.
Will?
You'll pardon me, but what was the question again?
Maybe to the Métis. Whose job is reconciliation here?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with Elder Bone. It's everybody. And that's again, not to beat a dead horse, but that's why when we do the land acknowledgements at the Winnipeg Jets game, maybe 90% of them aren't listening, but 10% of them are, and then they take that home and they think about it, or the 12-year-old who's there has a conversation with their friends at school, and stuff begins to build, relationships begin to form. So it's not just the national chief and our national president and the prime minister, absolutely not, because they already get along, so it's the people who live in the communities who have mold in their basements, who don't have a school to go to close by. We need to reach out, and we need to have the people who live in Fort Garry understand that Manitoba is going to be, Manitoba will grow as a province when we all grow together.
Nice. Elder Bone?
Just an additional comment too, we have no problems saying somebody come to our house and welcome to my house. We have no problems knowing as we walk through this door, somebody says, as you had, welcome to our session. So why not on a larger scale? Welcome to someplace. You're invited someplace. You feel welcomed. So why can't we say welcome to this territory that belongs to all of us? Why say that? It's only human part. It's only the love and the respect for other people to make them feel welcome. I think that's what we did 150 years ago and before then, to welcome people from all over the world, because that's what treaty is all about. Agui Diwen simply means that we welcome people. So I think to say that, welcome to University of Manitoba, welcome to Carl Stone's office. I know he doesn't say it all the time, but no, I do. But I think the point is, there's that friendship, there's that kindness, there's that love to invite people to be part of that process. That's what this is all about. It's about a relationship. It's about human dignity. It's about people. That's what it's all about. Maybe political in a sense, but it brightens up the spirit of the people to be part of that whole, whatever it is, whether it's a Jets game or the Bombers game, wherever it is, we say welcome. So I think it's important that we do that.
Right, and on that note, I think we're going to wrap it up.
Maybe one more question.
Or do we have time for one question? Does anybody have an excellent last question? Who put their hand up first? That guy in the back.
Yeah, thank you everyone for being here. I know we talked about the importance of the land acknowledgements now becoming a token statement. I guess with the increase of institutions, organizations, events using this statement, how do we protect it from becoming devalued? Just another thing that's said and people kind of looking out for it. I know you mentioned kind of making it unique, every time you try and say it, but how do we protect it from becoming a devalued action?
That is an excellent last question. Thank you. Loretta?
I always have to start the
I was
hard
looking at you.
questions. I always have to start the hard questions. Well, I think it's what we do, as I mentioned earlier, it's the follow-up, it's the challenges, it's the things that go along with it, right? I mean, and changing it up is one thing, it forces people to do their own thought processes. It's to have those critical analysis, those critical thoughts about, well, what is the next step, or how do we give meaning to it? And that's individual. That can be individual on how we do, how we bring meaning to those land acknowledgements. And right now, how I do it is I change it up, right? And then I ask engaged audiences that, and I'm in a different place than others in terms of then challenging and throwing it up to them. Well, how do you acknowledge? Or people will ask me questions, why do you say it that way? Right? It's to continue that conversation or those follow-ups that will keep it important. And you know what? And Indigenous people and have always operated through protocol. Protocol is always important. The shaking of hands, the hugging of people. Those are important. Those are forever meaningful without actually having to have those conversations about, well, why do you do that? Well, it makes me feel good. And I think the land acknowledgements, if they're coming from a meaningful place, will make you feel good. And so you don't lose that value, right? That value is not lost if they make people feel good and they come from a good place.
I got the side eye here. So that's exactly correct. So how do we keep this from becoming a stale thing? Well, that's do the hard work that comes after now, like the Prime Minister, the Premier, the Mayor, do the hard work to make sure that Indigenous people are included in society, in the economy, in universities, in the business world, in the job market. The land acknowledgement, as I said before, is good. It's important, but it's just one thing. It's a small thing. But then the hard work that comes after to make sure that yes, there was there were a lot of wrongs that were done in the past. We have to right them, but we also have to be moving forward all together. And since this might be the last time I have the microphone, I want to say thank you to Rosanna for moderating this, because, and I just wanted a little anecdote, because I think we talked about how long we've known each other when we walked in the door here, and I'm not going to say it, she's scared now. But I think I remember when you were writing for Weektama. Is that correct? That was quite a while ago. So that's how long I've known my dear friend here, and she's always done a very good job, and I just want to say thank you. And thank you to all of you for thinking of me, even though I was like third or fourth down the line. Thank you.
And David Chartrand's still the president. Yes. I think the guy's a vampire, but that's just my thoughts. Elder Bo, closing thoughts?
And the question that the young man over there asked, I think it's an important one. The reason why that's important, it's not because the spirit of what it means, but I think it's the words. Sometimes we put too many words and we kill the spirit of it. Welcome to such a land, and you add up all those things. Northern is our host will mention about opening remarks, one page, the whole thing. And I'm sure you're not gonna say all those things all the time. People are gonna get tired of it. But as long as you capture the spirit of the land, the welcoming remarks, I think that's the key thing. Because we might get tired of it. The northern, so it's welcome to. Then there's 100 words attached to it. Then you kill the meaning. Then you're putting too much definitions, too much things on it. So I think for all of us, and we should never get tired of it. Yeah, you're right. But I think sometimes all those fancy words are added. You have to select a time that you're going to do it. You can't do it for everything. If you got such a short time to say, you're not going to say for 10 minutes, whatever it is. So I think we have to select how we say these words at the occasion, at the time. So I think it's important. But the spirit part of it is really important, because that's really what it counts. Me too. That I want to thank for hosting us. We listen to our radio show most often. Some of us. But I also like to thank our brother from the Métis Federation for being with us, and of course my good friend the commissioner. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her. So I'm very honored. I like to share northern discussions with her, because I admire her so much.
Thank you, There we go. Well, Goodon. And, I forgot your name there for a second. I just lost it. Loretta Ross. I was going to call you Rosetta Loss. I'm like, wait, that's not right. And thank you all for your wonderful questions and for being here today.